All right, well, I think we should call the meeting to order 6:03 right now. Has anybody heard from Bill? So we don't know if Bill is coming, okay, and Anthony's not going to be there, right? All right, so we need to hash out what the, how we want to move forward with the rules here. So, Bridget, maybe we can start with you giving a little background. I wasn't at the last commission meeting, so I know you spoke with some of the peer members afterwards.
So we heard from a few different organizations at the last meeting in January, some of whom were 100% Fairfield residents, and one of which was not. And to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, 2 of them got approved. 2 out of the 3 got approved. Right. So the 100% residency ones got approved for blanket permits moving forward. And that was Falcons and Fairfield National and Fury. It didn't go through because of that exact topic. So that's basically the recap.
Yep, okay. So, I mean, I'm looking at the rules here, Section 36 in our rules and regulations. I thought a lot about this since, the last time we met. And I would like to see us build another tier in here. So let me just read what we have here in Section 36. So the scheduled use of town of Fairfield Field will be made available to the organizations listed below according to the regulations listed, with priority granted in the following order as long as space is available. Fairfield Parks and Rec Department sponsored activities, Fairfield Public School sponsored activities, permanent resident youth and adult leagues and activities that consist of all Fairfield residents, general resident youth and adult leagues and activities that consist of all Fairfield residents, and then E is any other youth and adult leagues and activities at the discretion of the Parks and Rec Commission or their designee. So, excuse me. Because the Fury doesn't meet the requirements of C or D, they fall into the E category, which basically puts them in a category that with entirely different fee structures. And we've heard from Fury that prevents them from putting together a league. So I don't see why we can't recommend to the commission that we build another tier here. And I don't know, I don't necessarily care if it's 90% residency, whatever number we decide is fine. But I do think we should create a tier for organizations like Fury that consist of mostly Fairfield residents. I mean, they would be second to the bottom in terms of priority. So in my mind, I don't see that is going to prevent any of these other tiers from field availability. I don't know that it's really going to strain us from a field capacity, but Galen, I would kind of lean on you related to that. If we were to create, say, another tier here, is that going to strain fields for the town?
Well, I think that's a really good question. We have received feedback that there's not enough fields in town from the leagues, and then also it did come up during the master planning process in terms of like the field utilization analysis, that there are like areas where we run short on field space, specifically in the spring and in the fall. Mm-hmm. Something I noticed this year is in working with Ellen, Fairfield Little League Girls Softball trued up their permits so tight that I feel like it was able to facilitate quite a few Fury call-in permits at those shared fields. So whether it was Duke Yellow or Veras or Sherman, those are the ones kind of coming to my mind, or Sturgis. I noticed because we had worked together on truing up the permits, it gave the opportunity for other leagues to call in. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, I don't think adding a tier would affect that in that way.
Okay.
I mean, the fact is there's a circle and it's the field capacity. It is what it is, right? It's not going to change. What we're talking about is lining up all of the all of the programs that want fields and putting them in some priority sequence. So we're not creating more field capacity. We're probably not creating any more demand.
Right.
What we're doing is we're facilitating a ranking of order based on our policy, representing the town of Fairfield, our parents, our players, all your department in terms of manageability. All we're talking about is creating that ranking, that order of priority. It's still, all the fields are still going to be taken. By creating another priority area, it's going to put somebody on top of somebody else, so they get less fields. And it may also take a little bit away from here, because if you, in the end, you're sitting down with, here's my capacity, here's my programs, here's how I rank them, here's their requirements, and you're applying your magic to do that. And so, what you're talking about is I think in principle, of course, we would love to have 100% Fairfield residents, because
and a step to it, I need you, have you go.
Right, and so creating those tiers, I think, helps, as long as we're not putting a burden on you that it becomes unmanageable. Because once you create that tier, if we use Fury as sort of the example to see how they would fit in there, there'll be others coming to that. There'll be others getting into that, and so it has to be manageable there. But I'm certainly in favor of creating that tiering, recognizing that anyone who has Fairfield kids playing, we want to give you a priority because it helps the parents. But I also wouldn't want to put them ahead of or at the same level as somebody that's 100%, because I think we still want to drive for that.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of behind your concept. But a big piece of this to me is getting your input on manageability, because we know anytime we create sort of an exception opportunity, people jump on it.
Yeah.
And if we create that, it has to be very carefully written. And I'm thinking maybe becomes, here's a tier under these conditions at the sole discretion of the Parks and Rec Department or the commission. Still make people come up, because if it's an organization that we're confident that they're really trying to get Fairfield players, but maybe they need to seed a few outside players to be competitive, or maybe they don't have enough Fairfield players, we'd be more apt to say, yeah, we'll put you in that category. But if it's someone who's taking advantage of it and maybe has 6 outside non-residents and they're just sort of rotating them through, and we don't show up, we can't manage at that level, right?
So it has to be a set roster for the year.
It's a set roster, but I think maybe that tier needs to come in and just sort of that, yes, we are still following these rules, here's our roster, and then it could just be a 5-minute in front of the commission, and start it off like that to make sure that you don't have 6 programs jumping into that tier saying, me, I qualify, and then suddenly you're the policeman, you're the judge, you're the jury, and I'm just afraid of whenever we open up something like that. But I like the whole idea of rewarding teams who really try, but maybe have a small number.
Yeah.
Just as an idea, but keep it manageable to start.
Yeah, that was really well said. Thanks, Judy.
To drive it home.
I know we talked about this at the last meeting, but can somebody help me understand the distinction between C and D, permanent resident versus general resident? Like, what is the difference between those 2 tiers?
Oh, it was mentioned, but...
I know, we talked about it, I can't remember.
Is it a rental?
It's on page 3, I guess, general resident, any person occupying a dwelling place within the town of Fairfield, including summer residents, university and college students. Permanent resident is domiciled within the town of Fairfield.
Got it, okay. So, I mean, I think what I would like to see done is we just build, we replace E with, general resident youth and adult leagues and activities that consist of a percentage of Fairfield residents, right? And we can agree on what that percentage is, and then, so that would be tier E, And then the current tier E, any other youth and adult leagues and activities, discussion of Parks and Rec or their designee would move to F.
Mhm.
So we'd be putting it below, the two tiers that consist of all Fairfield residents, right? So, I mean, I think I don't see why we have to make it any more, complicated than just copying, D and just putting a percentage on it. I mean, I don't know what the right percentage is. If we look at, say, a typical roster is, let's say, 15 players, right? I would want like max 2 to be out of towners. So if we said 90%, I think that is a reasonable number for people that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I like the idea of starting off with at the discretion of, because people will play with math, and I think, having a percentage as a guideline makes a lot of sense, but make it something where they have to come and describe their program and.
Would this be a yearly request?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, again,
Just the replacing E would just be a yearly request, right?
well, how do you qualify the 100% residents? They
provide the
we
roster.
don't get involved with that as the.
No, but they provide you with a roster, right?
Yeah.
For the spring and for the fall, so
Right.
twice a year when they would be requesting the blanket permits. And I mean, to your point, I believe that an organization like Fury has the opportunity to book fields at present under the current structure that's in place without building an additional tier. We've spoken about specifically Fury in my office at length and do not think changing the rules for a group like this is the way to go. We believe that they should model something like what St. Thomas did and go before the Parks and Rec Commission and ask for a discounted rate on field space annually.
Well, what if we establish the rate, right? So here's kind of how it rolls out in my head, right? We have this new tier, and the language I think is most appropriate is general resident youth and adult leagues and activities that consist of at least 90% Fairfield residents at the discretion of the Parks and Rec Commission or their designee. That, to me, would be tier E. The current E would move to F. And then as a commission, we decide that tier is appropriate. Then we come up with, we already have the price schedule for all of these different tiers. So, in my mind, we create a new or an additional price schedule that's associated to that tier, right?
I don't know if this will have the intent that we're looking for, like just in terms of issuing the permits on behalf of the town, like the batting cage as an example. They say all the time, shouldn't we be formally recognized? We're mainly Fairfield residents. Those words have happened with multiple organizations, whether or not it was batting cage or Rage or Olay. This comes up New England Hardball. It's really anyone that's not fully Fairfield resident that I issue a permit for says we're mainly residents. Shouldn't we be getting a discounted rate? And I think, I don't think it's the way to go. I think specifically in Fury's case, they're a 501c3 based out of Fairfield. So I feel like that in and of itself gives them the right to come before the commission to ask for a discounted rate. I just worry if we put that writing into our rules and regulations, it's not going to be just Fury.
And that's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid an avalanche of requests descending in your office or to the commission.
But that's why the 90%, if we designate 90%, it's cut and dry. Here are the numbers. You meet the 90% criteria. If you don't, I'm sorry, you fall into it. So like in the case of, what kind of requests are you getting from the batting cage and those other organizations?
I mean, the batting cage books baseball field every spring.
And they could come and say, I have a team with 20 players and I have two out of towners and I qualify. And what we don't do it at a team level. We do it at a program level. And so that, again, this gets into some of the, what you're saying because they're a nonprofit, because that they're a nonprofit based in Fairfield, that you think under the current rules, and again, we take that as an example, they would basically qualify for blanket permits? Or
No, what I'm
no?
saying is that Fury, as a 501c3 based out of Fairfield with predominantly Fairfield residents, I think
Okay.
they should come before the commission on an annual basis and ask for a discounted rate.
Okay.
But here's what so if you go that route, right, then it's on us to grant one over the other, but we don't have any cut and dry criteria, right? So like, we've done that in the past, for example, with St. Thomas, right? And why did we make that decision? I mean, I know that I did because, I was just trying to be good to people that were, wanted to do some good for the kids that they served, So I think we need like a standard. And that's why I just like a new tier that's cut and dry, it's 90%. If you meet that criteria, great, you fall into category E, here's our price schedule. If you don't fall into that category, you go down to the bottom and you pay.
Could we make it nonprofit at 90%? And
What's another example of a nonprofit besides Fury and St. Thomas? And like,
I think
you could
Fairfield I think all of our formally recognized groups are
Okay.
designated 501c3.
Yeah, because I think one of the things we want to avoid is,
Glen Caps is not, they're not, he's for-profit,
Yeah.
100%.
Right, Fairfield American, Fairfield National, Little League Girls Softball, Fairfield Youth Football, Fairfield Youth Lacrosse.
but Glenn would qualify under 100% resident. But I think maybe an idea would be to make it that if we want another tier, make it a nonprofit tier with a percentage
Well,
to avoid the avalanche of, because you know how Barricade works. So I don't want to go on the record, but.
What avalanche are you talking about? I don't know that it's our charge as the commission to deal in for-profit versus nonprofit, right? I mean, in my opinion, it's about residents, people that pay taxes in this town. I don't care, if you have all residents and you're making money, that's fine.
Rates have to do with.
What's that?
I think rates, not field rates, I think have to do with, if you're a nonprofit and we want to extend, that's the only discounts we've ever given.
Well, but I mean, if you're a nonprofit and you want to do, you want to conduct your business in this town, like anything, there are certain criteria you need to meet. I just don't think it's our charge to get involved with profit versus nonprofit. But again, I'm not concerned with whether or not people are making money or if it's that to me is not our charge. I think our charge is to look after the town of Fairfield and the residents that live here. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how does everybody feel about creating a tier like that?
I think it's a good suggestion this is what confuses me. I would like to hear what the commission thinks with us not bringing it as a motion, right? I want to know what our other commissioners think about that, because I feel like that's the least muddled option. If it's something that they are willing to move forward with, that goes maybe on the March agenda, to go back to council to see if that is something that can be changed within the rules and regulations. We'd have to have another meeting and then bring that to the full commission. That would be what I think.
I think we want to leave here today with, an understanding of what we want to propose to the commission, right? So if we all agree here that we want to create this other tier, we bring that to the commission and say, hey, Rules Subcommittee said that we think it's in the best interest to create this tier. Here's what it looks like. Here's the language that I read earlier, and here's the associated fee schedule. And then we vote on it, and that's what the charge of the commission is to vote these things.
See, I think we need to keep separate the discussion about rates and availability. When we give rate differences, it's because people are contributing time, they're not charging, it's not a business. We never give discounts, otherwise I think field availability is different than rates in my mind, and I think we'll muddle the whole conversation.
But Galen has been doing fields for Fury for a number of years, right? So it hasn't created any additional demand. It's the same people requesting fields. So I hear your concern about an avalanche, but I don't know who give me a scenario where this comes back to bite us in the butt.
Rage, Clubhouse,
Okay,
Clubhouse,
are they 90%?
Wolfpack.
Are they 90% residents?
If I ran the program, I could come to you with a 90% team, absolutely.
Well, listen, now you're saying this has to be honest, we want to see your roster, and we're going to follow up on your roster, right? Like, so you can't try to skirt the rules by saying, here's our roster,
We've done it
and
in the
leaving the
past.
kids off. Well, then we need to check up on that, you know?
That's part of the problem.
Well, I think, like Galen, right now, when you get rosters, do you check those rosters?
We do, yeah. I mean, mainly I look to make sure that every address is
Right.
Fairfield or
But you don't go to
Southport.
the field, and
If
you don't
there's
go to the
someone
practices.
out of town, we'll double check that.
Yeah.
Usually it's a
It's a
divorced
list,
parent
though.
situation.
That's all it is.
Yeah, I'm not going to a field or.
I was part of Rage, I guarantee you, and they were coming with full Fairfield, and they weren't.
They weren't. That actually created quite a situation with the Attorney General and sharing pictures of children.
Yep.
It was quite.
Yeah, so the different programs in town ratted on each other. It happened.
And you're talking like four additional organizations that you could pick up. Yeah.
It'll happen. And
That just makes me nervous for you.
that's why I talk about manageability, but I have no problem with saying that, again, we're using Fury as the example, and I have no problem them coming to the commission and saying, we are a nonprofit, here's how we make our money, here's what we charge, we'd like the town to contribute and help our program, because we are providing play space, we are using your fields, and we aren't raising rates, we're just really trying to survive and look at the product we have and say, okay or not.
Okay, but so Fury comes before us, right, and the commission that we currently serve on approves it, for whatever reason, doesn't matter what the reasons are. A year later, someone comes before that is similar to Fury, and they get denied, and they're like, why? Because there's no standard, whereas if we create a tier, we have a standard, it's 90%, you know, they met it, you didn't. I think
No, and I understand
protects us if we create that tier versus keeping it loose and having them come in and request approval each time they want it, you know, because I don't know.
But the tier should be measurable, like nonprofit is a measurable tier. That's you are or you aren't. And I'm not saying that's but that's something that you either have the paper and you're incorporated that way or not. 90% is room to play.
But why do we want to get involved with profit versus nonprofit? I don't understand, you know, how that makes our life any easier.
So would you be more apt to give a discount to a tennis coach who was contributing his time and maybe just getting gas money and giving lessons on their tennis, as opposed to a professional coming in and charging $100 an hour?
Of course, but again, I think our charge is Fairfield residents, right? So like, I don't really want to get in a situation where I have to approve that request. Like the St. Thomas one kind of, you know, makes me uneasy. I just prefer it to be cut and dry, 90%. Do you need it or do you not? If you don't need it, I'm sorry, here's what you gotta pay.
Again, just having been in this situation, I believe the 90% is going to be hard to manage.
But you're saying it's gonna be hard to manage because you think some of the baseball programs are unethical, is basically what you're saying, right?
Maybe not just baseball.
Yeah, whatever.
I think people will be incented to create books that look right. And if we had a policing arm and if we had a way to check up, if they had a badge, it's a one-time, show Galen your roster, it's got 90%, check, and then you're gone. And we're not showing up at fields, and I just don't want to put the burden on them.
Well, but we put the burden on them right now with the 100%, right? Like tier C and D, they get rosters.
Right.
You know? So, I mean, in theory, really, there could be some organizations that are currently saying we're 100% residents, providing a roster showing that, and then bringing, you know, it could be going on. I mean, I hope
Are
it's
any
not,
of them
but-
for-profit? Are they all non-profit?
Well, I know very specifically the group that just got approved, the Falcons, they're for profit. That's the one that's jumping out.
Fairfield Nationals too. But what does that matter? I mean, that's what, we're talking about letting residents of this town use the field. So again, in my opinion, if you're running a business and you're making money, or if you're a nonprofit and you're not, that doesn't matter. What I think I'm concerned, what I'm definitely concerned with is, I want the kids who grow up in this town, whose parents pay taxes in this town, to use our fields.
And that's why I'm just feeling uneasy combining rates and field availability, because field availability is what our policies are mainly about, right?
But again, in this particular situation, we're not putting a strain on availability, because Fury is getting the fields they've been getting fields for the last couple of years, and we haven't had, we've had field issues, but you've been able to manage it, right?
So 2 points to that. So in speaking with Terry Carroll, he had mentioned that the groups used to be commingled, and potentially, I think it was 2 years ago, they separated. And so I believe, and this is just my belief, that the Fairfield Little League Girls Softball used to allocate time from within their own permits to Fury. Last year, all of the coaches started calling in, which is something that residents can do, and getting 2 hours twice a week up to 2 weeks in advance. We now have passed a rule that businesses are not allowed to operate on town property without, consent from Parks and Recreation. And those residential call-in permits are not meant for organized play.
Right.
So last year, Fury did reach out to our office directly to book permits. But it was really only last year where we were made very formally aware this is a group that's calling in very consistently to get field space.
Well, it's happening in baseball too. You had teams that were using the Little League permits. So, that's why by creating this tier, I think we clean that up a little bit. Now, if we create this tier, Fury doesn't have to do that. They don't have to try to skirt the rule, right? Because they met the criteria.
So the tier you're talking about impacts of the field permits and rates?
When you say, definitely rates, but when you say permits,
okay, because that's...
Rates for the non-residents, like a discount?
Do you have the fee schedule? I was trying to pull it up. Do you have the current fee schedule?
So it's now $100 an hour for a grass field and $150 for turf.
Yeah. So, and at the C and D tiers, right, it's $25 per player per season.
For our formally recognized.
For our formally recognized groups. So what I'm saying is, instead of $100 per hour,
in the middle.
let's go something in the middle.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
I guess I just wanted to clarify. So at this point, we don't think we need to change any rules as it relates to permits. You made your operational change, and I think that was a good one, right, about call-ins for organized. I think that closes a loophole that there was, that I used to use all the time. And luckily, I didn't get sued.
That from it.
So we don't think that there's anything that we have to do related to field availability. And maybe looking to you, is there any help you need from us in terms of the rule changes related to how you issue fields?
No.
Okay. Oh, that's simpler, unless we think there's something we need to change. Now, rates.
Well, we have to talk about what.
Yeah, what rates?
And would that be put into section E?
No, well, the rates right now are not in our rules and regs.
Okay.
I don't know.
So those need to be added?
We purposely said we weren't adding it.
Okay,
Yeah.
right, okay.
Do you have the rate schedule that we looked at the last commission meeting?
The Board of Ed.
Remember the chart we showed
At the
that
full
showed
discretion of customer
the different categories and how much anything like
That was
that?
from Board of Ed, and I
Yeah.
don't have that.
Okay, that'll fall into, under the discretion of customer administration, okay. We just have to decide what it's going to be.
So right now, if we agree as a subcommittee that we like this tier, we can bring it to the commission, right? So I think the appropriate verbiage to me is general resident youth and adult leagues and activities that consist of 90% Fairfield residents at the discretion of the Parks and Rec Commission or their designates. That would be the tier I would like to add, bring to the
How
commission.
about put it now as an annual, make it an annual recognition?
I think all of these,
See, that tier probably should come before the commission. I think the others don't come before the commission every year, right?
No.
But if you're in that tier with exceptions, we'd like to hear your story.
Right.
And confirm how you're set up and operating.
Well, so tier A and B, A is Fairfield Parks and Rec sponsored activities. So
Right,
that's, you know, Fairfield Public Schools, that's.
You must come before us and get all those approved.
And then
Especially
C
the
and
money.
D, you know, we had the situation this year where Fury and Falcons came before us, you know, so I agree it should be annual. But I think that kind of takes care of itself, because at the start of the season, you know, they're gonna say, hey, Galen, we want our fields, and Galen's gonna say, okay, well, have you been recognized by the commission? So, I don't know that we need to put annual in here, I think, but, you know, I don't see why.
It was annual for where you had like the 90%. If you were if you followed the 100% resident rule and you were already working with them, like Fairfield American, Fairfield National, just keep going. Keep going. If you smell something, you can ask them to come back in front of the commission. But if you're trying to qualify under a 90% rule, for now, I think we'd like you to come before the board each year, explain your program and how you meet that criteria, so we can help them to manage that.
I think we should even have the league come in at a commission meeting, you know, because Little League right now says that you can have players from out of town.
If they go to school in the town, they're supposed to be able to play.
And I don't know that any leagues, I don't know if Fairfield National, Fairfield American has done that, you know, but being a national guy, I wouldn't be surprised if American tried to pull that. I'm just joking.
Can I read that back?
Yeah.
Okay. Section E will become general and permanent residents, or just general?
I would say general resident.
General residents, youth and adult league, that consists 9% of Fairfield residents to come before the Parks and Recreation Commission annually.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think we also want to add, at the discretion of Parks and Rec Commission or their designees. So general resident, youth and adult leagues and activities that consist of 90% Fairfield residents at the discretion of Parks and Rec Commission or their designee, and then, you know, semicolon, to be approved on an annual basis.
The complete discretion, or full discretion, or something like that. Let's at least start off with some tough words, and then we can always relax it later.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna get this in front of Phil Peters anyway, right?
Yeah.
Our attorney.
Yeah, because I could imagine there could be some impact on other facilities that the town prices out for all I don't know what, but there might be other facilities other than fields, like other facilities where they allow residents at a certain rate, and you never know. There's something there where.
I mean, just to talk about what 90% means.
Yeah.
If one team has 85 and one team has 95, I guess, how would I know who's going to be on which field when? I feel like you're really kind of keeping someone at their word.
Well, it's not teams, right? It's the program.
Overall.
So, yes, it's
So we
theory
should
as a
put
whole.
that as the overall program, and that's up to us to interpret what the program is. So I agree with you. We don't want an organization coming, we have one team, and they're 100% Fairfield residents, so we want a blanket permit, but hey, we have all these other that are all interchangeable, right?
I think as a league, they need to meet this minimum.
Yeah, that's what I wrote.
Right?
Yeah.
But then, you know, the situation there is, right, like let's say a league comes to us, we have 10 teams. One team is all non-residents, but they still meet the 90% requirement.
Yeah.
People still get fields, they just don't get blanket permits, right? I'm kidding. You're right.
That's tricky.
It is
Are there
tricky.
any examples of that?
Well,
No, I mean, just like the first.
I mean, any travel program can have, say, I created a Fairfield-only team, or a 90% Fairfield team, but all their other teams are people from everywhere, and they say, I just want the rate for this one team.
I think it has to be a program.
That's our
in the scenario that I just gave, you know, that's where, at the discretion of Parks and Rec Commission comes into play. If we catch wind that, you know, a program has 10 teams.
Right.
And one of them is on, you know, that to me is inappropriate. And then, you know, if that happens, I think then, you know, we need to maybe consider some language changes or something, but,
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what I'm wondering if we have to include anything about pricing.
well, no, we don't have to include it in this, but we do need to, because we're creating a new tier, we do need a new price schedule for that new tier.
Okay.
Right, because it's gotta be between the current $100 per hour, $150 per hour.
so that's part of our recommendation is that with this recognition, they get a rate in between.
Yeah.
We might even want to add something in there just to say, again, we're opening it up to some discretion here. If somebody, I mean, what would you do if you, I mean, what did you do with Rage when they were caught?
We pulled their blanket permits, and then we let them know if they did want to make field reservations moving forward, it was at the hourly field rate. So we took away their formally recognized
So there
status.
needs to be that penalty understood, is if you are recognized and you don't follow the rules, your permits will be pulled.
Mm-hmm.
And
Does that fall
terminated.
under subject to approval, or should that be added as some sort of addition?
I mean, to me, so we set the criteria, we said subject to approval, so then once it's approved, maybe a next sentence just says, once approved, if the program is found to not be following, the agreement, that permits will be pulled.
I think that's in one of the further sections that we pull the permit.
Subject to subject.
Galen, do you know off the top of your head if that's in section?
Mm, 43, yeah, violation
Yeah,
of these
there we go.
policies.
It's on the fourth, okay, there we go.
But it's good
So
question.
it's in there. So then, what do we think is an appropriate fee schedule?
All right, so 100 for field, let's start there.
Yeah, I never understood how we're involved with that anyway, because I mean, Anthony has a budget, right? He has to meet his budget, so if he's charging less, I think it's nice I think we should say the intent is that they have something that we differentiate, right?
Mhm.
More than this, less than this,
Mhm.
that we'd like to establish a rate and let them sort of work through it and see, does that mean you have to charge others a little bit more? I mean, Anthony, he has a certain budget he has to make, right? And if he suddenly charges some groups, if it's a reasonable number, less, then he has to make it up somewhere.
Yeah, we committed to generating $250,000 in field reservations and fees.
Okay. So you're gonna need, so we would challenge them to take that, recognize the tiers, that there should be a difference between, with this new tier, it should be above this, but below this,
Mhm.
and to come back with like a rate structure. But I agree, it's somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle, yeah.
Somewhere in the middle, just in terms of the benefits that we think that program, that tier should get. That's what we're really saying. There should be some benefit, some financial
Yeah,
benefit to them.
Yeah, I do believe that creating a tier of this caliber will make a group like Batting Cage or Wolfpack or Clubhouse come forward with 90% residency.
Yeah.
And they would be getting a discounted rate than what they're paying now.
But wait, are they currently, are they meeting the criteria?
I don't take their rosters because they're not a formally recognized group.
Okay, so then, you know, but the reality is, if they are 90% residents, then they should reap the benefits of residency, you know? I don't think they are, you know, I mean, my son plays against all of those, and they're regional all-star teams. So I don't think they're gonna be 90%, but if they are 90%, then I think, you know, I think that they should get the benefit of that tier. You know, because at the end of the day, they're still kids who live in the town of Fairfield whose parents pay taxes, you know, even though.
As long as we don't allow it sliced by team or by age group, or things like that. We're talking, so clubhouse, if batting cage came, it's batting cage.
Yeah.
It's not batting cage 13U teams. And that's where a lot of the argument's gonna be, but, I don't think they would commit to being X% Fairfield resident in their entire program. That's not how they work.
So you're saying you don't think that they would meet the criteria?
Overall, I don't
Yeah,
think
I
so.
don't think so.
If you take batting cage, but if you take
One
summer 13U, I've got 3 teams.
Right.
And they could have an argument, and we have to make sure that that's not valid.
I agree. I think it should be the program as a whole.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, does that need to be like added, is league enough of a definition? Should we add leagues or full programs? You would know better than I do.
Yeah, well, it's really at the organization level.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe in parentheses, not by team, not team, not group, not.
I can put it in parentheses for
Yeah,
now, and we can
not
just further
segment.
define it, you know.
But I think we do need to put that in there.
Yeah, okay,
Because
so should I get rid of the word league?
Does that help? If we do
Program
that
for
and say it's
organization?
basically at the organization level, and if we put in parentheses,
League,
not group, not team, not segment.
Sure.
It's, because you would definitely get requests, right? I have a team, I have 2 teams, I have, an elite program. No, it's your overall program.
It's your formally recognized organization. If you're a for-profit, how are you registered with the state of Connecticut as a for-profit business? That's your program. Do you meet the 90% requirement? If you're a not-for-profit, how are you recognized as a 501c3? That's your program. So I think it has to.
And the fact is, we have them coming in front of the commission, not in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not gonna come to you and try and say, I need to be recognized. They need to come in front of the commission.
Yeah.
And if they do, and they come as with a group, that will be all vetted out in the discussion. And we'll say, that's not the intent of how we set up this rule.
Mm-hmm.
You're not recognized.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's at our full discretion.
And not that we want to create any additional work, but if we need to audit somebody, right, we kind of feel like, I won't use a name, but we kind of feel like the league is looking to take advantage. They provided us with the roster. Games these days are very public. You can go on Game Changer, so we just have somebody do a really simple audit. Let's look at who's on the roster, who's in the batting order this day in Game Changer. And, it creates a little bit of work, but that's only, that would only come up if we feel like somebody is trying to skirt the rules.
Yeah. And if the penalty's there, if it's a dramatic penalty that says, your permits are pulled.
Yeah.
You're out of business in the town.
Yep.
Not just do you lose your rate or your blanket permit, no, your fields are gone, right? That hurts the parents and the players, but if you're working for if you're playing for a dishonest program, that's the risk.
Yeah.
What happened to Falcon last year? They used to feel that they didn't have a permit for, and was there?
Fairfield American was allocating time from within their permits for the Falcons.
Oh, okay.
And we only found out about it as our office manager was driving past Gould Manor.
Okay,
The field
okay.
was closed.
Okay.
And they were playing a game.
Okay, got it. And they were fine? Or no?
Fairfield American had to pay for the damage to the field.
Got it. Okay.
Can I request just a quick 5 minutes?
Sure.
Anyone hungry?
I'll take those. Thanks.
I am when I drive, I'm addicted to these.
Yeah.
I just pop them.
What if, based upon the number of players on the roster, 90% doesn't equal if there's a decimal involved? Because
So I think that falls under subject to approval by Parks and Recreation.
So the guideline is 90%. We set 90% as a threshold that's what we want to see.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody comes with 90.2 or whatever, to me, that's up to us to interpret the intent of their program. I mean, the kind of things we don't want to see are programs that meet the 90%, but there's Fairfield town resident players who want to play on the team, and they don't have a roster spot because there are out-of-town players. But to me, it's okay saying, I have a team, and my parents, my kids, my program wants to be competitive, so I can bring in a couple players, and they may be the ones who play a lot of the time and maybe more than others, but the intent is you're rotating through the Fairfield players, they're getting their play time, and that we are encouraging the fields to be used by our residents.
How did we come up with 90% as the number?
That was just his number. It could be anything. And when the commission discusses, the commission may say, we like that, but it should be 95%. And if you think it should be a different number based on what your experience has been, we can make it another number.
Well, I think it should be 100%.
Okay, sorry about that.
But we're not saying you have to treat them any different for field allocation, right?
No.
Right. It's just rate.
Yes.
Okay. She was talking about the 90%.
Yeah.
Whether that's the right number or not, and I said that'll probably be vetted out in the commission.
Yeah.
But if you have examples where you think if it's set at 90 versus 95, that it makes a difference in manageability, we can change that.
Yeah. I would want to lean on Brian as the president of the commission to kind of weigh in on that. But I mean, I think we go to them with 90%, open it up for discussion. Now, how do we feel about the fee schedule? So right now it's $25 per player per season, right?
Except for American National and Little League Girls Softball that pay for the maintenance and projects of their home fields.
Okay. So they get.
But those fields are really dedicated to them, right? Nobody else can get a permit from Mill Hill, right?
No.
Even if it's not being used?
Yeah, we pretty much exclusively put
Challenger
Fairfield American
yeah.
at Mill Hill and Fairfield National at Tungsten. And I've actually had never previously put anyone at Yellow besides Little League Girls Softball, but Fury had reached out multiple times to request it, so I allocated it to them.
Okay. But they pay into the maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's their contribution to that.
So what if we went to the commission with, like, for example, say a 40% increase in fees? So instead of $25 a player, it's $35 a player, or I don't know if that's the right number, but that is more manageable for the organization that meets that requirement than the tier below them. It creates a little revenue for the town, not as much revenue as we would get if they were paying $100 per hour. But how many organizations are paying that right now?
The hourly?
Is it just like the batting cage?
I mean, there's like a dozen, because it's a lot of like summer camps too.
Oh, okay.
Game breakers and all sorts of summer camps and stuff.
Do you think any of those, let's just say it's a dozen, or any of with this new tier?
I think so. I don't think this is a good idea. I think if we're worried about playability and Fairfield children being able to play, I think there is a current structure in place for them to be able to pay. It's just a matter of it's a different rate structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're going to say something like 90% residents are now okay, so to encourage non-residents to be playing on the fields, then maybe it's 90% of the hourly rate.
Well, can you give us an example of one of the organizations now that falls in the bottom tier that might qualify for this new tier?
It might be batting cage.
Okay.
I don't really know. I never asked them for their rosters because they weren't recognized.
I don't think batting cage. I mean, I haven't played against them. Their program
Or near the camp, if you have local camps. And that's where I was getting before, maybe thinking about profit versus nonprofit.
Well, which camps are using the field, are using the field now at the lowest tier or bottom tier? Do you know?
What?
Which camps, are there camps right now that are a part of that dozen groups that are paying $100 per hour per field?
Of course, all of it.
But they would fall into this category?
Not unless they had 90% residents. I don't know what the residencies, like I've never asked.
So we're talking about, I thought we were talking about leagues and organizations.
Teams, not camps, right? Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because it will become a problem if we don't wrap around it the right way. The intent was not somebody who's running a camp even for, 5 weeks in a row. The intent was not that they would fall into this category.
Well, I guess what's the difference between like a Fury and like New England Hardball that requests permits predominantly in the summer,
Yeah.
but if there are fields available, we'll ask in the spring and the fall. I don't really know what, they're both organizations.
Yeah, but New England Hardball isn't 90% residents.
I wouldn't know that.
I can tell you for sure, because I played in one of those leagues, there's people from all over. There's not enough men in the town of Fairfield, even though we're 65,000 strong, to put together a competitive baseball team.
And I'm just not understanding the camps versus leagues.
Yeah. So when we say camps, are you talking sports camps or, just a camp for kids in town?
Sports camps.
Sports
That
camps.
would request field permits.
But not two teams playing against each other? Just,
No,
like,
it's
playing.
not
Just don't want to
competitive.
feel
Yeah,
to
I
show
feel like
up
that's
and
a
we.
different category to me. I mean, that's why it says leagues and,
But
that's
What makes
why
it
that's why we clarify formally recognized organization.
Mhm.
Right, if you have a camp in town and you're using our fields, your camp is associated with, is formally recognized under the Wolf Pack or is formally recognized under, whatever organization it is, so that we still look at that as a whole.
but subject to approval.
Right.
No, but we don't want to make this unmanageable for you, so you need to help us understand the situations you think you'll be faced with and why you think why you're hesitant with this concept and see if we can help build the recommendation to avoid that. And if we can't, then it's probably not going to get approved. But if we can, I think it behooves us to try and build our recommendation around making sure you're not going to be faced with, as you said, 8 camps that pay this amount that really were not intended to be able to take advantage of this. So you got to give us some examples, then we have to see whether they would fit into this or not.
Yeah, well, I just think already in this conversation, we identified like a few of those local baseball teams.
Yeah.
But, depending on how it's written, I guess we would be able to identify that organized camps are different than organized leagues.
Yeah. Because I think our intent was not that it was camp, but then we'd have to make sure we.
No, but if it's a camp, it's affiliated with someone, right? So like if you're like the batting cage, right? So we look at their whole organization, including, the camp is part of that. Like, let's see the roster of kids you serve in your facility, but also at your camp. All right, let's say there's 100 kids. If 50 of them are out of towners, then you are going to continue to pay the fee that you're paying now, which is $100 per hour. Right? So, I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, but like you said, there's roughly a dozen, right? So what are do you know off the top of your head what those dozen are? So we know Wolfpack.
Wolfpack, New England Hardball, Ole Soccer, Game Breakers, University.
What's Game Breakers?
Lacrosse.
Okay.
That's the University Lacrosse. Those are just a few that I'm thinking of right now.
Yeah.
Let's see if I have any more. Those were the biggest ones.
Mm-hmm. But, again, I keep stating this, if those organizations are 90% Fairfield residents, then they should be able to reap the rewards of this new tier.
So whether they're a camp or a league, it wouldn't matter?
I think that's part of the program that the organization that we're looking at.
So you're saying like if Fairfield American wants to run a camp, they should get the same rates for that camp as they do their program.
Yeah.
Their program, so because they're part of that organization.
Well, how about this? Fairfield Ward does a baseball camp. I mean, I think Ludlow does a baseball camp, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are they paying?
School rate.
So I think Ken Jeriak did a baseball camp, and it was a program in which we handled registration, and I think it was like a 70-30 split on program fees.
So you're saying that it was a Fairfield Public School sponsored activity?
It was a Parks and Rec sponsored activity.
Okay, all right, so that's a different criteria. Okay. I honestly, I think this new tier is something I think we've discussed this enough to bring it to the bigger commission. I don't know of all those organizations that you just listed. I mean, I don't think any of them are going to move up a tier. But again, if they did happen to move up a tier, it's because they have 90% residents, and they should be able to reap the rewards of that new tier that we're creating here.
So can I just ask, we're creating a tier just for Fury?
No, we're creating a tier for organizations like Fury that have mostly Fairfield residents, but they don't meet the 100% criteria, right? Because we've heard Fury, we've heard from Fury that because they don't meet that criteria and they fall to the bottom, it's cost prohibitive for them to put a league on. And in my opinion, I don't want to make it cost prohibitive for an organization. Let's say there's 100 girls and 90 of them are Fairfield residents. I don't want to make it cost prohibitive for those 90 to play, even though they don't meet the criteria of the 100% residency. So I just think creating this new tier eases things for programs that, consist mostly of Fairfield residents.
Yeah. I think part of it is we can't offer so much of an incentive that businesses maybe like Clubhouse are incented to sort of morph their business model into like creating, okay, no, we're batting cage 1 and batting cage 2. Batting cage 1 is a separate entity, it's a separate organization, and we're 90%.
Well, but it's like they're going to create a separate. I mean, if they go through that hassle, they have other problems to deal with.
Yeah.
That's where the discretion comes in.
Yeah.
Right.
Batting cage is batting cage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
We could put that on batting cage system. No, kidding.
Yes.
All right, so I think that we agree that we want to go to the commission with this new tier, right? I think are we comfortable on the language?
I think so.
Okay.
I'll send it to you guys too before I send it to
Yeah, and I think we have to start with sort of defining sort of why do we think this is important? What's our objective, right? Of recognizing that there are programs like this that we should help them to thrive in our community.
Yes, because 90% of their participants are our neighbors and our friends, people who live in this town.
And that we're trying to set this up that as long as they come before us and they show us the right intent, the right model, the right roster, and that it's believable, that we are willing to recognize them for that year, and then hopefully they adhere to what they committed to, and if they don't, then their permits are pulled mid-season, and so there's a real penalty, and not that we're the police but they need to do what they said, what they promised.
I didn't mention. Nope, never mind. Got it.
How about the fees? We can talk about this at the commission as far as what's the appropriate, but instead of 25, if it was 35 for this new tier. For fields. 35 per player per season versus the 25. So, you're not 100% resident, so you can't pay, paying $25 per head, but you meet our 90% criteria, so instead of 25, it's 35. I mean, again, I don't know what the right number is. We can talk about that at full commission unit, but.
I mean, we want it to be in between, but that's where I think you guys are gonna have to go back and see you're gonna have to sort of say, okay, let's assume we have one or two, we have X program, what does that do? Because let's say you're right now, set your rates and you're at your budget. And you committed to 250, you're at 250. If you're gonna charge somebody less, you're gonna have to charge somebody else more and set your rates. Right? I mean.
Yeah, we just approved our rates. I don't think that we're gonna change them.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The last time they were up to like 2,000. Long time.
It was before I started, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah, we didn't really address, last time we did rules and regular, we didn't address rates. We just addressed rules.
But, and then something else that we need to bring up, like this new tier creates a new revenue stream for the town of Fairfield, right? Because Fury last year was paying the $25 per head, right? Because they were on the Fairfield Rule and Girls softball. So now the $35, you know, we're not getting the E tier of $100 per hour per field, but we're getting more than we would for the full residents, right? So it helps the town too. Unless more come from that bottom tier up.
Right.
But that's up to us too.
Seems a little what?
Little low.
Little low? Okay.
Yeah. But again, we can just come to the full commission like that.
Yeah. I chose 35 because it was, you know, roughly a 40% increase. I think that is 40% increase. My math is right. Yeah.
And just because someone comes before the commission and says, I meet these criteria, if we don't feel that it's sincere, if we don't think they have enough of a track record for whatever reason, or maybe we feel like, you know what, we don't have the budget to do it, okay, because we sort of planned that we would have maybe 3 people in this tier. I mean, it's all about discretion, right?
Yeah, but
you can't.
That's why we're creating a standard, right?
I know, but you can't spend the town's money.
But how would that be spending the town money?
If someone goes from a bottom tier up.
Yeah, but again, if they go from the bottom tier up, it's because they meet the criteria, and that criteria was designed to support the kids of Fairfield, right? So if they meet the criteria, then yeah, it thinks that the town is gonna be losing some revenue, but they're 90% Fairfield kids, you know?
If you're running a town, you can't run like that though. There has to be some fiscal responsibility. All I'm saying is you couldn't have 10 programs go from bottom up, and the town doesn't get their revenue.
But if we feel like we're in that situation, Jamie, then we get back together as a rules committee and we say, hey, listen, let's bump 90 to 95. You know, and that's our charge, is to, you know, while we're looking after the residents of town, we're also looking after the town itself. Yeah. So that, I mean, and we have the flexibility as a commission to do that.
Yeah, I just didn't think that we were, I mean, the rates aren't in, we establish a tier, which is part of the rules, and you know, but the actual rates themselves, we've never, the rules committee doesn't, that's not in our charter.
No, but
the actual rate itself.
But our commission did just approve the new schedule of fees.
Right,
with
that
the
was
recommendation.
attached to a budget.
Right, with a recommendation.
Yeah.
It came to us. We didn't actually, did we approve it?
We did
We
talk
did.
through it, yeah.
Right.
But it was tied to his budget.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm gonna spend, here's what I'm gonna collect, it's approved by, this is what I'm gonna present. So I'm just saying, we can't make any kind of dramatic, you know, one tier change, a couple program, no problem.
Yeah.
But if it's not really up to us to set the exact rates. I think that's Anthony has to do that. And if this passes, then he would have to take that into account.
Yeah.
How he then sets his budget.
So then let's do this, let's go to the commission with the 35. If you could please talk with Anthony and figure out what's the appropriate middle ground between residency, $25 a head, and then lower to the $100 a head. In your mind, what's middle ground? And so we'll take, you know, your guidance on that when we talk about it at the commission meeting to figure out what the right number is.
Okay.
All right? So, Bridget, so you will be in touch with Kelly Brown to get this on the agenda for our next meeting, our February meeting?
Yeah.
All right.
What is left on the rules scope? We did beaches, but that's,
Is Justin all set?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and on January 5th, we had sent all of our changes to Phil,
yeah,
and he hasn't responded back yet.
okay. But there's nothing for us to do now on beaches. We've sent him everything we want on beaches. Is there anything else in fields, because there's other rules and policies in there other than tiers?
Well, we made all those recommendations, remember, but it hasn't come before the commission yet, right?
No, it was approved by the first lawyer, but now not the new lawyer.
Okay. All right, so we're waiting on Phil Pierce before we can look at it as a commission.
Okay.
Yep,
So nothing for us to do right now, it's in Phil's
that's
hands.
correct,
Okay.
yeah.
So you're saying in the whole scope of the document, there's nothing, all the changes we wanted to make other than what we talked about tonight are in his
We
hands?
had previously gone through them all, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Does this need to go through him as well before we bring this to the full commission?
It's only interesting because you had said you wanted to gauge the group's.
Yeah, I think we should raise it as a concept.
Okay, but so it would need to be
And
approved by him as well.
Then we'd have to, based on what, so we don't want it to go to him and then come back to the commission and they say, no, strike this, change
Okay.
this. I think we want to raise it as a discussion and say, this is what we think we want to do.
Okay, but not vote on it?
Well, I think we
We probably want a motion to go forward.
approach it.
Okay.
And then we would create sort of a rule, you know, we'll create something to send to the lawyer if it gets past the commission.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Anything else?
I like this building.
Yeah,
That's really nice. I'm glad I looked at the agenda because I would have been at the,
Mill Lane.
yeah, I just looked last night and I went, whoa, why are we there?
Sorry, before we wrap, let's give an opportunity for the public to comment.
Okay.
If we could ask you guys, just because we're gonna be voting, we're gonna be looking at this at the next commission meeting, which is February 21st, so, while your comment tonight will certainly have some influence, you know, the comments to me, you know, if we could cap it like a minute or two, because the comment would be more appropriate at the time that we're meeting when we have the full commission, so.
It's good that you heard sort of what we're trying to do and that's what you're saying.
Any comments on the public?
First off, just want to say thank you for having this meeting. That's number one. A lot of the stuff that was said, I very much agree with. I think another tier is what we're looking for as residents, not as residents first and foremost. You know, girls' sports are different. So you talked about Wolfpack, you talked about, you know, some of those other rage. Our travel league runs much differently than those, and it just doesn't work. We don't have the numbers that those baseball teams do. You know, you have a son in this town, you have 5 different options for travel. You have a daughter, you have 1. So I think this is very important. I agree with the recommendation to try and add a tier. My 2 comments would just be, as you're looking at fees, or as Parks and Rec, the department is looking at fees, just like you looked at fees for the last one that just went up to $100, and you looked at the other towns, what are they doing? I'd urge you to look at the other towns and see what they're doing for similar programs like us. What are they doing for 90% residents or more? And based off of that, I think that's important to see what these other towns are doing. And then I know you're super against looking at the non-for-profit. I disagree. It just doesn't sit well with me. I don't see how an organization like ours can be lumped into the same group as Rage, Wolfpack, Olay, even Olay, I mean.
We're not lumping you in, right? We're
No, I
creating
know
a
you
standard
are.
for Fairfield residents. So I just don't think nonprofit versus profit is what this commission is, we're here for the residents of Fairfield. And this
Right.
new tier helps the residents of Fairfield.
But of those for-profit organizations, they can then be run by a non-resident who is now reaping the benefits of possibly a lower rate, a lower usage rate.
If I can, they also are not passing that savings on to their players.
The residents.
For sure.
Yeah.
So the residents actually don't reap any benefit.
Well, but that's then, but that's up to them to choose another travel program, right? If they're not reading this, but in terms of what we do in granting field space, that benefits the residents, in my opinion.
And I get that, and I get it's your opinion. I would ask that when you do bring the motion, or when you do put it on the agenda, that comes up in conversation just to see how the rest of the commission feels. I think that, there's, I forget
By the way,
what that is.
comparisons that you made as well, right? Because you did a analysis of other surrounding towns, and a lot of them have that tiered fee.
They have these different tiers. I mean, there's a couple towns that have specific travel tiers, and, percentages that tie to them. So profit, nonprofit, I mean, you're going to look at these other towns, even the Board of Ed recognizes a nonprofit versus a profit. So our Board of Ed. So again, that rate increase that you had last month was to match, right? Let's true up and match what the Board of Ed is doing. Well, the Board of Ed is also making a difference between nonprofit and profit.
Yeah, I'm more aligned with your thinking, again, my personal opinion. But again, we're a commission, we all have opinions, we have to compromise, that's how government's supposed to work, right? But I would be much more apt to approve a discount, asking like the question you said is that money going back to the residents? Is it going into the program or is it going into your pockets? And that to me is the difference, is we're not trying to make a program more profitable, we're trying to help the kids, players, and the parents, and I think that's something that we have to be very aware of, and again, I love that question, just what's going to happen with that if you get lower rates, because we're not stockholders in their programs.
Right, so it could be going back to a non-resident.
Yeah.
So I would just ask that when you bring it up at the next meeting, that is discussed as well.
Yeah, thank you.
What's your name again? Sorry.
Yes, Ellen Kiernan. So, and hopefully you got my
Address?
public input.
We did.
And you live in Stratford.
I wrote it all down.
We'll resend for the next one.
Also, I was wondering, when we're looking at rates, why can't it model what we're doing for adult men for the girls? So if there's $100 fee per out-of-town resident for men, why are we not doing that for our girls' league? Like the $25 per resident and then $100 per out-of-town resident.
Yeah, that's the men's leagues are a Parks and Rec, so they are technically the upper tier. But I mean, I haven't looked at the numbers, is 100, so like, let's use some real numbers. How many girls in Fury?
Yeah, I wouldn't have on the set.
Sorry, got too much stuff in here. All right, let's just look at it from the way we currently are.
Well, how many girls? 72 girls?
We have 76, well, yeah, I mean, this gets tough because the tier you want us in right now is a per hour tier, right? And so now we're going to be moved to a per resident.
Correct.
Right, so it's hard to take those into account. But at the per hour rate that you currently want to charge us, we estimate that we're going to be looking at $43,000 a year.
No, but that's why we're creating this tier, to make it more financially feasible for you guys to serve the girls in Fairfield.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have,
So,
go ahead.
and you want to go into a per resident, I mean, honestly, like Bridget said, I thought 35 was a little low. I was like, okay, that sounds really good to me.
Yeah.
I'm okay with, 50 per resident, and like Jessica said, we're happy to charge our non-residents more money.
Well, I mean, if it's.
Would you actually charge, would you, as a program, would you say to those parents, you need to pay more because you're not a resident? Okay, you spread.
I run it. Well,
I mean, it's something we'd have to discuss, obviously, as an organization, but,
I think you're looking at more like.
I think, let's say, okay, so our roster is set for this year, and then it's over in the spring, right? Let's say next year, we've got 100 kids. One kid out of the 100 happens to be an out-of-towner. Those 99 Fairfield residents get penalized because there's.
No, that's why, let's, can we have a discussion offline?
Yeah.
Okay, so, anything else from the public? I just want to end the recording so that we can, put a bow on this meeting, and then we can talk about this further.
Can I just get your name, please?
Sure, I'm Esri 459 Roanoke.
Did you get that?
Jessica Iannico, 89 Harvester Road.
Yannico?
I-A-N-N-A-C-O-N-E.
I'm sorry, Brenda.
Come on, you didn't get that?
Let's do I.
Anything else from the public?
It's a wrap.
All right, we're gonna wrap the meeting at 7:19. Can we stop the recording too?